So, colleagues, final session of the day, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Cat Scutt, who is Deputy Chief Executive from the Chartered College of Teaching, and her panel. And here we are to talk about and explore how AI might support learners in education, which is not something we hear every day. So, welcome and thank you.
Great, thank you. I think how busy the room remains despite being at the end of the day now is a sort of sign of quite how amazing the panel that I have here is, and it's my absolute privilege to have the chance to chair what I know is going to be a fascinating discussion. We've just had a few minutes beforehand thinking about what we're going to talk about and some amazing strands of ideas coming out, so really looking forward to the next 40 minutes or so. I might give the audience a chance to ask questions if I don't be too selfish and just use my own. But I think before I get the panel to all sort of introduce themselves, Anne-Marie suggested, I assume you're going to ask the audience where they're at in terms of AI use, and I thought that seems like a great idea for you to do, Anne-Marie. So Anne-Marie's going to start us off with that.
This is why you don't share your good ideas, folks. That's the lesson I've learned today. So it's a sense of temperature taking of who we have in the room. Who here is from the independent schools sector? Okay. How many of you are part of a MAT? Okay. Brilliant. How many of you are in a SLT kind of leadership position? And who here is an educator, teacher, more frontline? Do we have any technicians in the room? Okay. Oh, hi. Thanks, technician, for joining us. Awesome. Right, so onto the AI bit. Who here has AI switched on across your educational institution for use? And who has a total ban on AI across your institution? That's why the technician is here. We're kind of piecing this story together. Who is fearful of AI and its use in their educational organisation? We have to kind of go up in our shades from fearful, don't we? Who is very, very excited and has, feels encouraged and supported to engage with AI? So I'm assuming there's no fear as you're encouraged and supported, and who's somewhere in the middle? Okay, is there anyone who hasn't raised their hand yet at all? Okay, is that good enough, Kat?
That was an excellent job, well done. Brilliant idea, and just great to have a sense of who's here. I actually did raise my hand for both fearful and excited. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive.
They're not, yeah.
There are the bits of me that think, oh, this is really exciting things, and actually, I hear fantastic examples of things schools are doing and think that sounds brilliant, and then I hear some of the really horrific things happening, and I think that's terrifying. And I think for a lot of us, that's probably where we're a bit at, sort of teetering between the two. So really interested to hear, hopefully, lots of positives today from the panel, as well as recognition of some of the challenges and risks that we need to avoid. So what we're going to do now is go along the panel with, everyone's going to introduce themselves, a bit about their kind of context, and then share one example of where they've seen AI being used really effectively to support either all learners or a particular group of learners, and just really getting that sense of, where can things work really well. So we'll come straight back to you, Anne-Marie, and then move along the line, if that's okay.
Sure. So my name's Anne-Marie Imafidon. I am founder and CEO of Stemettes, which is an organisation working specifically with girls, young women and young non-binary folk to engage them in STEM and STEAM learning. We're outside of school, but of course support a lot of schools as an extracurricular set of activities. I also chair something called the Institute for the Future of Work. So looking at this kind of from the macro in terms of skills learning, not just for kind of pre-16, but also post-16. And then finally, I currently serve actually as the DSIT Women in Tech Envoy, looking at how we increase the proportions of women working in technology. And so my interest in this panel actually is that it's not just about having more women in technology, but having technology that then serves society and is reflective of society. So in terms of the use case that I kind of identified, we said we'd keep it kind of light. Maybe some of us, for me, the one that I find the most exciting, and might be why I'm on this panel, is the use of AI in formative assessments. And so some of you may be familiar with Sentry Tech, who've been working with this for ages. But I think what excites me the most is using AI to be able to understand the knowledge and build up a picture of what is understood by individual learners, but how we might take that in the context of future assessment. And so rather than always having a summative one grade and one number, we have a picture or a visualization or something else enabled by the AI that allows us to know what somebody knows and understands and the skills that they have, and how that might map onto not just curricula, but jobs and roles and other things that might be useful for them later on in life, that they can build up a picture that travels with them rather than having one grade that is the summation of all that they are at that point in time.
I think that's, an incredibly kind of broad vision, isn't it? And I think what's kind of exciting but also terrifying about that is the change that would need across all sorts of areas that are nothing to do with AI in order for that to be meaningful and to kind of exist across the sector. And a really interesting thing to raise with the theme of today's conference and all of the things that we've been hearing about and thinking about, and thinking about just that last panel, for example, really brings all of that together. Julie, let's come to you next.
So, hi, I'm Julie Carson. I'm Deputy CEO and Director of Education at Woodland Academy Trust. We're 5 primary schools across Bexley and Kent, so kind of that southeast London, lovely M25 corridor. We serve a wonderfully diverse population, so higher than average PPG, EAL, SEND pupils. We're one-to-one devices, been an Apple Regional Training Centre for 4 years, and we've got 2 Apple Distinguished Schools as well. We use AI quite a lot, so both in the classroom, out the classroom, to support kind of trust operations as well. But the piece that I really wanted to share today was around assessment in maths. So we use a particular tool in maths which identifies real-time misconceptions. So it will give a heat map so the teachers know exactly where they need to go and support from the child's point of view, rather than waiting until the end of the lesson or, not being able to catch everybody during the lesson to see how they're doing. But what we particularly like about this tool that we use as well is it uses AI to analyse all the misconceptions. So the child has to show how they've worked that question out. So you understand right at their point of thinking where it is that they're going wrong. And that for us is really key, because we can play that back. We can unpick that with the children in particular, use it as a teaching tool in the lessons as well.
Brilliant, really helpful. And actually, I'm part of a task force looking at kind of the sort of AI tutoring piece that has been in the media quite a lot. And there's something really interesting about that again, if that really, for that to really work, it needs to be able to do that, to really identify where is the student at now and where have things perhaps gone a bit wrong, where have they perhaps had some misconception or misunderstanding, and how can we build that knowledge up? So a great example, thank you. Sonya.
Thanks, Kat. Hi, everybody. My name is Sonya Lanckham, and I'm Deputy Director of Education at Windsor Academy Trust. So we are a trust of 15 schools, and we're based in the West Midlands, even though my accent would suggest that I'm not from there. So part of my role is to head up our digital strategy, so PedTech and AI, and how that's baked into the trust-wide 2030 strategy. We position it as an igniter. I think Kat asked us to share at the beginning a powerful space where we believe that we're seeing AI have a real impact. And without question, as an educator, but most importantly, as a parent of a child, adult son now with SEND, he has autism and a learning disability, which is very different to learning difficulty. But without question, what excites me is definitely the inclusion space. And obviously, it's not just, we're talking about any child whose learning is vulnerable. So obviously, SEND would be a critical group, but also children with EAL, children from disadvantaged backgrounds, etc., etc. And I think in terms of, we're looking at this via a Trailblazer programme involving 70 members of staff. That's teaching staff and non-teaching staff, or professional services staff. And we're looking at, through this project, we're looking at it through the lens of inclusion and also reducing workload. But with that inclusion piece, one of the best papers that I've read as an educator and as a parent is Peps McRae and Dr. Jen Barker's paper on inclusive teaching. And they basically suggest 5 principles that underpin inclusive teaching, from embrace cognitive similarity, prioritise high-impact core instruction, make lessons accessible by default, adapt minimally and appropriately, and empower teacher assessment. And definitely AI is a thread, a catalyst through each of those principles. But a beautiful example, and we're just actually pulling our learning together primarily via walking, talking heads, because our staff have told us that that's the way they want to be taught and to build their AI literacy through real walkthroughs. So one of the most powerful walkthroughs that landed really beautifully, particularly with our educator staff, is that from one of my colleagues, Kirsty Tinsley. She's a teacher of history, and she did a really powerful walkthrough where she's teaching a year 10 GCSE history group, and she had a beautiful young girl who arrived this year and joined that group with a reading age of 6. And she does a walkthrough of how she just basically leveraged Gemini to adapt a big overview for her around what the module was about, the knowledge organizer, all of those adaptations that she made to set this student up to thrive at the point of entry before even the module was taught. And what really filled me with joy and hope as an educator is actually going in and seeing that young girl in the lessons accessing the same material that was just adapted very, very skillfully by the teacher in a low effort, high impact way. So I think the inclusion space, my own son, bringing it back full circle, is absolutely thriving now, has a permanent contract in Waitrose. If it's good enough for the royal family, it's good enough for my son. And he's thriving there. And actually technology and AI is really playing and has played a key role in enabling him to self-regulate and flourish as well. So I think that inclusion space is a deeply exciting space.
Thank you, Sonya. Some really inspiring examples there. And I think something that's really important that came out from what you were talking about there is how the technology and the AI use is not sort of abstracted from or separate from pedagogy, but it's how does it support us in the areas that we know work really well? How can AI be leveraged in a really high impact way? Great examples, thank you. Simon.
Hi, my name's Simon Balderson. I'm Director of Innovation at Wishford Education, which is a group of about 12 independent schools across the south of England. So my role is really to sort of think about the future of education and what that looks like in an AI-enabled world. I think we're going through the middle of a revolution that is as significant as the Industrial Revolution, but happening at far greater pace and scale. And the challenge for all of us really is to think about how we react to that. So in terms of practical things involving AI, it's my job to be at the sort of cutting edge of things, and I would happily sit in a darkened room and play with armies of AI agents and that sort of thing. I'm working on a couple of tools such as a personalized AI agent for every pupil and member of staff, and some tools to give really detailed feedback on A-level English essays that are based around Aristotle's ideas of pathos, logos, and ethos. But really, I would say that actually in the most immediate and most impactful way, the other side of my role is staff training, sort of bringing up the skills of all the staff in the group to a baseline. And it's really lovely to go and visit some of those schools and see it making an immediate difference in terms of adapting lessons, particularly for SEND pupils or EAL pupils, and staff being able to see the benefits and the time savings of using AI practically to save them time.
Great, thank you. I'm going to come to fear in a minute, but I'm slightly terrified now at the prospect of Simon's army of AI agents that he's creating in a darkened room. But really great, again, to hear these practical examples from how these things can work in schools. Great, Phil.
Good afternoon all, I'm Phil Avery. I also started out at the BBC, but I haven't made it to leading global education. I've made it as far as Director of Education for Bohunt Education Trust, which is a group of 10 schools across Berkshire, Hampshire, West Sussex, Portsmouth. There's 1 primary, 1 all through, and 8 secondary. And one of the things that I've been looking at is around how we can enable our staff to all the ideas, the expertise that's out there to bubble up, but also how we can keep our staff experimenting, how we can keep them designing new use cases, new prompts for the good of our students, and doing that in a safe way. So one of the first things we did was we put a policy in the background. I sort of themed it around the same idea as trips and visits, because one of my other big areas is around the outdoors. I take students away to Greenland and Canada and places like that, and I thought if we can get students into an environment where we have to carry a shotgun, we should be able to manage AI safely within a school. And so we have that sort of same approach to our AI policy, not the shotgun bit, just risk assessments and use cases. And then we've set up our AI working groups so that we can have our staff essentially using design thinking. We've trained our staff in design thinking so that they are working really fast on create a prompt, trial it, fail, reiterate, bring it back around and find something that's workable, minimum viable product. And that's just been fantastic. The things that have bubbled up from that we could never have designed ourselves but have come up from our staff. We've got a biology department in one of our schools that have pulled together a 1,000-word prompt that takes the program of study, that takes the knowledge organizer, and then sense checks all the resources that are going out to the students in class. Not only that it's on what we want to be teaching, but also that it doesn't create confusion. Have we used the word weight when we meant mass? And in another lesson that happened before, there was the word mass, and now we've used weight, but we've conflated the two. It goes looking for that. It strips out extraneous content. It strips out extraneous details from slides so that we've got students who have got the information they know in a simple, clear, and understandable way. And then with the AI working groups, where we're now going to, is it works so well with staff that we're bringing that to students and trying to understand student voice as to how are you using this? What are you finding most helpful? And we have one student there that every time they get given a piece of creative writing, they go straight to AI and they create an image. Because for them, when they get given a creative writing task, they're really struggling to picture it. And so they use the AI to create an actual picture that then can be used as a stimulus for their creative writing. Now, that's a scaffold we're going to have to take away before we get to the lesson. But for now, it's creating wonderful learning, flourishing for that young person. And they actually do it in their own time around poetry, as well as in school time linked to the AOs.
Brilliant, thank you. We were talking about something quite similar yesterday and at a conference, and it reminded me of back when I was doing my teacher training, using Windows Movie Maker extremely slowly and extremely painfully to create transcribed video versions of all of the anthology poems, Seamus Heaney's Storm on the Island and things like that, and the class being blown away by the fact that I'd managed to do this, but the fact that it genuinely took me sort of days per poem at that time, and then about 6 hours to export it on the desktop in the corner of the classroom, compared to how quickly you could create some amazing version like that now. But that's technology, hey? I've got a few different questions. I'm going to come with a slightly different question to each member of the panel, and I'm going to come first of all back to you, Phil, around the theme of fear. So I think lots of us said that we maybe have some fear around this, and you also mentioned when we were talking earlier the kind of importance of being aware of actually the safety implications and everything around that. So how do we recognise when that fear is correctly placed, and how do we address that? What sort of safeguards do we put in place to mean that AI can be used safely and effectively?
Yeah, and I think first place to start is there's lots of different types of fear, and there's fear of lots of different types of thing as well. So there's the fear of what AI might do to our students' learning. There's the fear of what AI might do to our jobs. There's the fear that they may be cheating in exams. All these things are different fears, and we need to not... when we're looking at the idea of fear, is to try and get down to the specific of what's bothering someone or an organisation or some people. I think the second piece around that is that we have to have that policy. We have to have something that enables our staff to know what can AI be used for, what can't it be used for, and what to do when there's a really big, large grey area where we're not quite sure yet, or it's something that's not covered by the policy because it was only appeared a few days ago. And that's what we've tried to do around this idea of use cases, and that's why it links back to the same idea as trips and visits. With trips and visits, we have sort of sign-off at different levels. You know, if it's going down the road to play another school, there's hardly any sign-off at all. But if we're going to go away to Greenland and take a group of young people up onto the ice cap to go wild camping, there's a whole load of sign-off, and there's a whole load of paperwork around that. And that's the approach we've taken with AI, is that depending on what the use case is and the number of people affected and the way in which they may be affected, then there are different levels of sign-off and different people involved. So I think that's one part of it, and then the other bit, and then I will let others come in, is the idea of filtering and monitoring. In the same way that we would expect all of our students, if they put into a search engine, how do I commit suicide, we would expect that, number one, to be blocked, and number two, to be reported on in virtual real time. That should be exactly the same at AI. There are now products that are good enough that that it will stop the AI responding, it will monitor that, report immediately, and then beyond the immediate harm to students, it will also enable you to have dashboards of what are the most common prompts, what are the most common things that students are asking of AI, and that's really quite enlightening. That's just about there in some products. That's relatively new. But we should be filtering and monitoring to the same extent with AI that we are with our normal internet systems.
Brilliant, thank you. If I get you to pass the microphone along to Anne-Marie. This is great because I gave them a whole list of questions which I'm now completely ignoring to give them a sense of uncertainty about what I'm going to ask. But you talked there about fear about sort of future of jobs. And Anne-Marie, I wanted to come to you to have a bit of a think about that. What are the skills that we need to make sure that we're supporting both children and young people and actually educators with in order to be prepared for this slightly uncertain future?
It's enlightening. It's quite exciting, actually, when you think of the skills that are required for what happens next. So at the Institute for the Future of Work, there's been a huge kind of Pisarides review that we've completed over the last couple of years, looking at the labour market, at the economy, and one of the kind of outputs of several of them has been an analysis, actually, of job roles that have been put out over a kind of longitudinal period of time, and how certain skills have shifted, have either disappeared or kind of come up on the forefront. No prizes for guessing. AI appears in quite a lot of them, right, in the last couple of months. But the kind of long-standing skills of critical thinking, of creativity, of communication, of collaboration have remained steadfast in all of them. And I think it's nice. We were almost talking about this a little bit earlier, that those are skills that you need for life. Those are also really good skills to have when you're engaging with an AI, in order for that kind of safety piece of, can I critically assess and think about what it has given me? Like, this isn't an answer, this is maybe a prompt, or this is a challenge, or this is a response, rather than it being, this is the total truth that I should take in and of itself. This idea of collaborating with the AI of course has limitations. It has them now, as we're kind of in earlier versions. It will continue to have them because of the nature of the technology, how it's built, the data sets that we have, And so actually, you're able to collaborate with that. Are you able to create with that as a starting point? Are you able to continue to synthesize that information and kind of generate new things? And so this is what we're seeing in terms of future workforce and the skills that will remain incredibly important for folks to have. The other ones that then end up coming are around the notion and the idea that lots of the roles that young people will be entering into don't exist today. I mean, us as adults now are kind of grappling with that kind of the front of it, but they're coming up behind us, and so this notion of reskilling, upskilling, and learning itself as a skill is something that continues to happen. And so, I mean, if we're going to look for any joy or any things to kind of help you with the fear and help you with the change management, it's that actually managing this change is going to be a really good skill that you need to develop, that there will be continual changes that you need to manage and grapple with, but also that your students and your learners will be able to do. And so that's something for you to role model, those iteration cycles or those agile cycles, to say, actually, this is one of the ways that we might learn, one of those the ways that we might develop, and one of the ways that we manage and handle change as human beings. And so it's those kinds of things that end up being really important, but it's learning how you learn, right? It's these kind of STEAM skills, if you want, creativity skills, critical thinking, collaboration, communication. And then I think the final skill is the resilience for that amount of change that's coming. And there's again something to be said of how we're able to role model that as we go through this transition for the young people that we're supporting and that we're bringing up behind us.
That's really helpful, thank you. And that's going to lead me very nicely to Simon, where I would like to have a bit of a think about how do we support teachers with the skills that they need to use AI effectively. Should we be encouraging everyone to? Should it be entirely up to them? I think, EdTech has always been a thing where can be quite a lot of divide across school in terms of how much people are enthusiastically adopting or otherwise, but AI feels like a real extreme of that. And I think there was an interesting Teacher Tap survey a few months ago now, which asked teachers how much they're using AI in their work, and quite a large proportion said they were, but I would say probably everyone is through some of the standard sort of productivity tools they're using. They just might not be aware of it, but there is a huge amount of kind of variation in terms of where AI is being used and isn't being used. So how do we support teachers through that? What should we expect? What skills do they need?
It's a really interesting one. Looking at the teachers across my group, I sort of send a little survey to them before I come and do inset training with them to say, what's the current temperature? What are your current views on AI? And there is everything from, I'm really excited, I want to use this more, why can't I just give my children ChatGPT and let them get on with it, to I never want to see this in my classroom ever, I think it's awful. But I think ultimately the starting point has to be, well, it is here, it's necessary. The skills of using AI are necessary for our young people to operate well in the future. And as you say, using AI is not just using ChatGPT. There are some great immediate practical tips, like even really basic things like just turning on subtitles in PowerPoint is really effective for literacy, for EAL, for SEND pupils. It's one of those things where a huge number of children watch Netflix with the subtitles on. That might just be because they don't teach actors to enunciate properly anymore and they just mumble into the camera. But it is also really good for EAL, SEND, all of those things. And so absolutely there are multiple modes of using AI and really interesting ways of doing it. And I think the key, for me at least, with our staff has been to show the benefit to teachers, to be able to say, this is how you can save time, you can automate those repetitive processes and focus more on those much more human things that we've talked about, the sort of creativity, teamwork, collaboration, leadership, those much more human qualities which won't get automated away, and that they are the most critical things.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Sonya now for the nice small topic of digital divide and actually whether with AI, whilst we've got the government kind of saying, oh, can we use AI tutoring to narrow the disadvantage gap, is there actually a risk of the kind of Matthew effect where those who already have benefit more from AI and those who don't perhaps are struggling more to use it, and we end up unintentionally widening the disadvantage gap through the introduction of AI in our schools? Is that a risk? How do we tackle that? What do you think, Sonya?
I think that risk is very prevalent and it's there, that's the reality. There are some schools in the country, many, who don't have that, even the digital infrastructure in place for staff to do the basics of screen mirroring, for example, to enhance their instruction. So I think that is already, a problem in many schools, in many areas. For us, we've been very strategically intentional. All of our young students from year 3 right through to year 11 do have their own one-to-one device. We're very proud of that. We had a big push on sustainability and that basically subsidised for every young person, regardless of background or whatever, having their own device, so having access to that. I do sometimes then, I think that there is that, because again, there are many schools where young people don't have their own device, so therefore they don't have access to the technology after the end of the school day. I love the idea of, I think it's a real opportunity around coaching. I still think, having come from a disadvantaged background myself, I think of, and having to still remember the dread of the 11 plus, and friends of mine who came from more privileged backgrounds having their their own one-to-one tutor. And that's what happens. So I think there's real opportunity with AI tutoring, particularly for the very students who need it and would benefit from it the most. But I think, and then there's obviously the elephant in the room with the divide between, the sectors, the independent and the state sector as well. We're trying to be creative with our funding in the state sector and trying to see, well, what can we do? What's baked in, for example, to our Google Workspace that we already, what's there, what's free for us? We wish we'd far more funding to be creating, to be innovating with various companies. And I think some of the tech, I think they're there like vultures, ready to sort of consume our money with things. So we're having to be very, very careful indeed. But I think in doing that, I think that and being cautious, therefore, certainly for us through our Trailblazer programme, we are absolutely finding those spaces where we think it can make the greatest difference, and then campaigning to make that available for our staff and ultimately our children. I also want to give a big shout out to the Chartered College of Teaching, your journal that you produced, I think it was the end of the summer last year. That was really, really brilliant as well at helping us navigate this space. But yeah, I think there is that divide.
Thank you. I know Anne-Marie wants to come in, and then Julie, don't worry, I've got a great question for you.
I agree with everything that Sonya said, and what I wanted to kind of add on to that is that there's a real opportunity actually in this new thing proposed in the white paper. I think it was yesterday, kind of put out this idea of AI tutors, in that if we are able to learn how to implement this in a way that is equitable and does kind of close the divide, then in theory that would be something we should be able to apply in other places where we've not necessarily had the impetus or the kind of the political will really to make these things happen in quite a big way, because digital divide is not just about necessarily the access, it's also about the connectivity, it's about the literacy. And so I think if we're able to do that in a way that kind of works, who knows, right? There might be other problems in terms of infrastructure and kind of connection to the internet that are able to be solved in different places. I'm reminded of the time that we went to do a session up in a school in Newcastle, and they kind of warned us at the beginning this is going to be online, kind of building games with primary school, kind of year 2, I think, no, year 4 it was. But they kind of warned us that sometimes the internet connection goes down because there's a particular school, there's a particular tree, between them and the school up the road, which is where the kind of connection gets pinged. And this wasn't 10 years ago, this was last year. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how much this AI dog wags the tail of things that should have gone on before. And so I'm excited to see whether, in figuring it out, a lot of those things get sorted, and that won't just be, a benefit for the education sector, it'll be, a benefit for the economy at large.
I think that's a really sort of exciting and optimistic vision. Julie, what I want to think about, you to think about, is how we build a culture within our schools, across our schools, that enables AI to be used effectively. And I think, this is a lot about implementation in general, but how do we make sure that all of our staff, and not just our teaching staff, but actually all of the incredibly valuable support staff that we have, are understanding the ways in which technology can be used? How can we help with the challenges around kind of the initial workload in getting it to work for you, and how that might then sort of reduce workload ultimately? How have you had any sort of examples of where that's working?
Yes, so for us it's always starting with that why. So making sure that our strategy is connected to the why we want to introduce anything. And it's also thinking about the problems that we want to solve. So making sure our strategy is actually rooted in kind of real life issues. So when I was talking about the maths before, why was that? Well, our problem was our maths results weren't as good as they should be for any of our cohorts of children, whether they were SEND, PPG, more able. So then we had a look at, right, what is it about that then that we need to put into our strategy with the use of AI? It's also got to really fit in with your trust or your school vision and your values, and because you don't want it to become a distraction. There is so much out there where you think, oh, this looks great, it would be fantastic if we did this, but actually, is that going to make a difference to who you're actually serving and what it is that you're trying to do? I think we've also had a really clear cycle. So we've identified the problem. My role, I have the really lovely role actually of identifying that problem, but then scouting solutions. So a case of, right, we know maths results aren't good enough, or we know our writing isn't as strong as it could be. What is there out there that can help us with that? We then set up a pilot. And what we make sure with our pilot is we have a really rich cross-section of staff. So it's not just our teaching staff, it's our support staff. Right at the beginning, it was a case of I had to kind of strong arm people to volunteer to be part of pilots. You want to do this. Come on, it's going to be great. Whereas now, I have too many people actually who want to take part in the pilots because they can see the impact of it. And I think the pilots would make sure is always rooted in research. So it's around what's our starting point, what's the data at the end of it. And it's not just anecdotal data, it's kind of research journals, it's kind of data we collect at the beginning. So we did a lesson planning research project, which we've published, and that was very much around let's get some of these metrics in before we start, and then we can compare them at the end. We capture pupil voice, staff voice and all of that before we make any decision as to whether we're going to kind of roll it out to the rest of the trust or not. Obviously, in that element as well, we've got all the data protection that Phil talked about, so our lovely DPIAs, all of that element in there. But I think because of the fact we try it first, and the staff have a really clear kind of communication around, I've seen this, I think that's going to help us with this problem on our school improvement plan. Can we have a go at it? So it's not just kind of me sat there thinking, oh, this will be a really great solution, because I'm not in the classroom anymore, sadly. But we have that actual from the shop floor saying, this is what's working well for us, and actually, this isn't what's working well. It would be the worst possible thing if you rolled this out to the rest of the staff. Don't do it, no matter how great you might think it is. So I think that's really helped. Plus, going back to the fear, being really explicit with staff to say, within these boundaries, have a play. Nobody's going to be judging you. If you're having a go at something and it goes completely wrong, so what? It's what do you do with that information then? It's what learning do you take from that? And then how can you share that learning with everybody else as well? If things are going wrong kind of 6-7 lessons in, maybe slightly different conversation, but we wanted to make really clear it doesn't matter, have a play within our structure.
Brilliant. I can see how persuasive you were getting people onto your pilot there, Julie. I can see Julie as the person who's going, it's going to look great on your CV as you get people signed up to do all sorts of things for you. We're getting quite close to the end, so snappy answers, please. But I'm going to come to Simon and Phil to think about how do we make sure that AI is being used in ways that are helpful without kind of cognitive offloading or outsourcing the thinking, both for pupils and teachers. Because that is absolutely a risk with pupils, but it's absolutely a risk with teachers as well if they're overusing it in planning. So thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, I think in terms of planning lessons, it's meant that we have to completely rethink how we do assessment, how we design lessons around a positive use of AI. I think homework as a way of measuring a pupil's understanding of something is essentially dead. You have to assume that if you're asking someone to go away and do some work and come back, that they may well have used AI at some point. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just involves adapting, how we're assessing learning. And you can make some really interesting lessons. There's a task I do with some year sixes where they spend a long time describing the features of a monster and talk about the environment that it's in and what the weather is like and what it looks like, whether it's got large claws and all the rest of it, and then to put their writing into an AI image generator, and immediately they can see the results of the creativity and the thinking that they've been doing. So there are positive ways of doing it. I mean, the cognitive offloading is good for staff in a way. It gives them more time to actually focus on the children, but thinking about how you reduce that cognitive offloading for pupils and actually get them to engage cognitively with the task is tricky. I suspect, as we've heard a lot today, we will end up with a lot more Viva-style assessment. I love the EPQ and its many variants. I think those sorts of things are really interesting and also focus on the sorts of skills that we've mentioned a few times now.
First of all, just quickly say, I think the cognitive offloading does go to teachers as well. There was a paper that I think Fran shared with me, around teachers didn't find that they felt there were efficiency gains using AI if they were just using AI to create resources, but they did if they were using it to challenge their thinking on planning, etc. And then one other thing, when we're thinking about cognitive offloading, transparency. Teachers are still in charge of their domain. That classroom is theirs. They are keeping children safe. They are, first of all, when they are supporting them to learn. Secondly, and if they are using AI, the AI should be able to create transcripts that can be passed to the teacher.
Fabulous, thank you. And I'm going to then come to Sonya, then Julie, then Anne-Marie, just for one idea each of something you would like government to do to perhaps support use of AI, to support collaboration around use of AI, to really do something that would help you and help to change the system in a way you would like to see it. Sonya.
I think it's identifying some of those high leverage, evidence-informed spaces where we could collaborate as a sector. I just have this fear that we've got groups of leaders in individual schools there's like this digital arms race, spending hours, days, weeks, essentially doing the same thing. And I think, why not mobilise the sector to come together, identify those wicked problems that we're all grappling with, but where AI could make a real or offer a transformative solution, and let's come together instead of, I think there could be actual leadership burnout if we're not careful, and I'm seeing lots of nods from the audience, and that's why I think collaboration is really, really important, locally, regionally, nationally.
Great. Julie.
I think for me, it's around the DPIA element. So yes, we've got, the structures about what tools should have in them, shouldn't have in them. But I think everybody still needs to do a DPIA. So, and we're all doing the same, whoever's using Magma Maths, for instance, or OLETS Writing, you're all doing your own DPIA. So actually, the DFE can do a really quick, solid piece of work around these are the tools that have actually been approved. These have got a kind of a gold standard tick, or, actually these haven't been approved, so don't look at them, because you've got to be a data specialist. And if you're not a data specialist, it can be really difficult then to kind of find your way through it. So that would be a really quick win, I think.
Lovely, thank you. And Anne-Marie, last word to you.
This is why you don't go last, because everyone's taken your answer, right, before you go. I mean, I would double down on the procurement. I think there's a lot more support that the government could do on procurement at an education sector level. And I don't actually know that the government really uses its power and the leverage it has in procurement in terms of public sector equality duty. There are, quite a lot of things that kind of fall short on a lot of the software that we're allowed to use, able to use. We're doing a whole system procurement process and holding folks to account on standards. I'd love to see the government doing that.
Thank you. And actually, one of the things that the Chartered College of Teaching is working on at the moment is the DFE's EdTech Evidence Board, which doesn't go as far as that, but I think is an important step towards understanding how might we encourage some sort of selection of tools, at least by schools, based on the quality of evidence they have. And that comes back to your point as well, Sonya. Thank you so much to the panel for sharing so generously of their ideas and not even slightly rolling their eyes at me not asking any of the questions that I told them I would. Thank you for listening and thinking so hard in the audience as well. And over to Bill to finish the day.
Stay there for a second. Give them a round of applause, please. Because we've reached that moment in the day when I say thank you so much for coming. Hope you've got big ideas, medium scale ideas, little ideas that you can do tomorrow. I'd love to thank our brilliant panel members, our speakers and our panel chairs. Please put your hands together. Thank you very much. Big thank you to Haberdashers Livery Company for generously hosting us in this magnificent space, and to the great tech team who've been supporting us. I love your idea of organisations which are mobilising the sector. So to 3 organisations who are mobilising the sector without whom this event would not have happened: HMC, the Edge Foundation and the Chartered College of Teaching. Their own CEO giving herself particularly generous applause there, I thought there. And to a number of individuals, again, without whom this would not have happened, to my friend and colleague Ollie Newton, to Jaideep Barrow, to Alma Conville, to Alison Peacock, and to Kate Howell, and of course to Sarah Fletcher, who we would have loved to have heard her voice today, but she's been with us and I've been listening. She's been talking, but quietly. So thank you all so much for coming.